Hello, friends. I am so happy to be sitting down with you again. I feel like everything has just been fighting me. Everything has felt so like I'm Sisyphus pushing a rock up a hill, like just so much resistance. And it's interesting that I'm feeling that after having done week 1 of the Artist's Way. If you are new here, I just restarted the Artist Way. This is my third time doing it, and I've decided to do it again because I'm at a plateau creatively, personally, in a lot of areas of my life where I just need that next piece in the puzzle of my journey as a person, sort of emerging from a pretty dark period in my life. And the Artist's Way historically has really helped me put together the vision and the direction that I need to move into that next step. So, just very briefly, that is kind of where I'm at. Usually, when I start the Artist's Way, it is an exciting adventure. I am usually very stoked to wake up and do my morning pages and, work through the exercises and the tasks that accompany each week. But there is something about this week that just fought me every step of the way. It was a drudgery to get up and do the morning pages, which is shocking because I'm such a journaler. I always have been. I've always taken great pleasure in sitting alone with my thoughts and writing them out. But I did find it interesting that Julia Cameron states that for some people, starting the Artist's Way is fraught with resistance. And for whatever reason, this third time around, that is where I'm at. One thing that Julia talks about in week 1 of the Artist's Way is how important affirmations are to your creative recovery and your creative journey. And entering into the methodology of affirmations inevitably comes with what she calls blurts. And these are sort of your inner sensor's resistance to you now perceiving yourself as a creative individual. And of course, we all come to this journey, should you choose to do the Artist Way, we all come to this journey with a lot of different past experiences. I mentioned in a previous video that I think if you are an artist or if you are someone who is going on a creative endeavor or be attempting to build something creative or literally to become an artist, you come with a lot of baggage to this journey. You come with a lot of pain. There is a lot of rejection that you have experienced inevitably in the role of creative person. I do love that that's where she starts us. She starts us by acknowledging our past pains, but also some of our prior joys and successes. And so with the affirmations, which personally for me is something I don't love, but I'm trying to keep my mind open to. Every time I've done the Artist Way, affirmations have been something I've really had to push myself to incorporate into my journey. So I'm really trying to pay attention to that this next time around. So as I was doing the excavation of my blurts, the caught something that she said in the writing of week 1 is that blurts flag your personal negative core beliefs. They hold the key to your freedom in their ugly little claws. Make a list of your personal blurts, and then it's time to do some detective work. Who was the first person who said those things to you? What was the first experience you had where that thought came into your head? For the first time, I wrote down myself as one of the originators of these blurts because I am someone who is wanting to step more into the dream I have had of writing and writing a book, being someone who builds an audience on their words. And that's really hard for me because I have fundamentally struggled with confidence in my own ideas, in my own words, my own thoughts. And that has manifested as maybe leaning too much into the intake of other people's words, so much so that when I sit down to write, when I write something, I will look at it through the lens of, but would so and so have written it this way? And that is a really tough way to talk to yourself. That is a really difficult you're never going to get anywhere if like I can't accept my own voice as it shows up on the page. This time around, that is something I'm really looking to free myself of, having the confidence to accept my voice as it is, having the passion to write be enough right now in this area of my journey, in this step of my journey. So that was my biggest takeaway from this week, just working on those affirmations and the blurts, and how, as painful as they are, these blurts hold that piece of excavating something from our past that we can now take and apply a different perspective to, or we can choose to rehab and see differently. Okay, so I have a tendency to talk down on myself. I have a tendency to maybe want to or think I need to imitate another writer's style of describing suspense or action. You get what I'm saying? Like, I don't need to do any of that. One of the ways I've been trying to write more and be confident enough to put it out is on Substack. And I have a Substack where it's slowly becoming what I want it to be. I have a weekly series where, I talk about something that I've observed in the prior week as important to becoming a creative individual. And then I go into weekly rituals for the reader to do to strengthen their creativity, strengthen their personal identity, connect with their community, do something creative, establish domestic rhythm, and find ways to weave literature and creativity and art into their week. And so it's called the Sunday Table. And I kind of attach an essay to the beginning of these posts just to bring the audience into something I've been thinking about. And I've really, really enjoyed writing and getting in that practice of translating a thought, translating an experience into written word. That has been kind of the way that I've stepped out into my own personal creative goals this year, particularly. But there always is that sense of, oh, I'm not as good as A, B, and C. I'm not as good as this person over here. I will never be that good. And like, why am I talking to myself that way? When you show up consistently and do something consistently and you practice it and you're building the craft, inevitably I will get better. And I can't judge my journey and where I am in my journey with that person's. I know nothing about what they have had to fight for in order to get that ability to look so easy. In my last video, there were a few of you that commented saying that you also felt like you yourself were in a creative plateau, and that is such a isolating place to be because you feel separate from yourself almost. You feel like this creative fire, this creative drive, this dream that I have is like hanging in the ether. It exists in my head, but maybe it doesn't yet. Maybe I don't even have the idea for it yet. And I would encourage you to be patient, to continue to show up in those ways that you know you need to. For me, that is writing. And for me, that is sitting down in front of you and talking out loud about creativity. It's meeting with friends who are also pursuing creative dreams and discussing our ideas together. And it's following the 12-week course of the artist way, which I know I really have needed to do right now. So that is my take on week 1. I am trying to improve my self-talk for sure, particularly where it intersects with my creative identity. I think comparison has always been something that I struggle with. I think every artist comes to a wall of futility where comparison is concerned, of like, I absolutely love what this creator is doing. I love what this writer or this artist, insert your medium or your passion there, and wanting to emulate some of that or wanting to incorporate some of the elements of their work into your art and your creativity. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Austin Kleon has a phenomenal book called Steal Like an Artist. And it's not just advocating for the blatant stealing or, profiture off of someone else's creative ideas. Obviously not. It's about really getting in tune with your own identity and identifying what it is about their art that you like, and then planting that seed and seeing what comes of it. taking the inspiration strike, right? Something that really endeared you to their work, and then finding a personal way of infusing that ethos or that inspiration into your work and making it something that's unique to your lens and your perspective and experience. This week, I'm going to try to be more consistent with the morning pages. I have actually put my journal next to my bed this time instead of coming out here to do my journaling, which is typically, this is like my spot. This is where I journal. This is where I read. Um, I don't know. I love being by my plants. Like I have a whole this like bookshelf runs the span of my front window, and it's, full of books and my plants, and it's just, I don't know, it's like creative and creatively inspiring. So in order for the morning pages to work, they have to be done. It's something that I have to get out of my head in the morning before the day starts. That is a big goal of mine for next week. I did do an artist date. I kept it simple this week. I took myself on a silent walk where I just listen to the birds and the natural sounds of my feet hitting the pavement and my arms swinging and making the swoosh sound as I'm walking with my jacket, and like looking at the daffodils that are coming up along the path, seeing how the grass is turning from sort of a mustard Dijon into a bright emerald green. And I just intook those images. Another thing she says is we have to consume images in order to keep our creative well full. And I think that has to be done consciously. I think we are so consumer heavy right now that consciously inputting images into our brain and filling that well has to be done with more intention. And so finding that balance between physical visual intake and digital is personally what I think I need to strike a better balance with. So hopefully some of that resonates. Let me know where you are in your creative journey. If you're doing the artist way, I would love to hear any takeaways that you feel like really meant something to you this past week. Even if you're weeks ahead of me, it's okay. You're not ruining anything for me. I've already done this a couple times, but I love how different each journey through the artist way is. wanted to do a quick reading update. I just finished Restoration by Ave Barrera. This is from Charco Press. They are a publishing house that specifically puts out books written by Latin American authors. And so I've really liked what I have read from them so far. And one of their books ended up on the International Booker shortlist. So very impressed with the works that they published so far. But Restoration was a phenomenal book. This is a Mexican Gothic ghost story that very much blurs the lines between death and life, pain and pleasure, past and present, the legacy of families, the violence inherent in the male gaze, using really interesting symbols and motifs like photography, art, restoration of old homes. This house that our main character, Hasmina, is restoring for a sort of on again, off again boyfriend named Zuri. His great uncle has just died and left him this beautiful colonial sweeping villa in Mexico City. He hires Hasmina, who has a specific speciality in restoring and updating old homes while still maintaining their historic value. And Zuri is very clearly a narcissist. He can only look at the world through his lens. Literally, he is a photographer. Everything comes second to his ability to create art, but he himself will create his art at any cost. And so the book kind of explores what that cost is for Hasmina, specifically at the woman who is literally on the other end of his lens. And so there's a lot of things that are coalescing together in this book, but book juxtaposes Hasmina's experience with Zuri, and we go back into Zuri's family's past of his great uncle, who he's otherwise very close with. He's the one who left Zuri the house. His uncle, Don Elegio, had a family, and this family's legacy, particularly his relationship with his wife, Gertrudis, was awful. And I will not say much more because I don't want to get into spoilery territory, but we begin to see the blending of Gertrudis's story with Hasmina's story, and how at some points in the book, particularly towards the end and the second half, we really can't tell who's talking. Ave Barrera is a phenomenal author. I want to go back and read her other, I think this is her third book or this is her second book. She has multiple books out. But I was so in awe of the way that she blended and mixed the two experiences of these women existing in the orbit of these very bad men. And I loved the way she played with narrative structure, with themes, with, Mexican folklore. And in terms of kind of making you understand how much I loved this book, this is going to be one of my top favorites, if not my favorite, of 2026 so far. This is one I would love to own. I wish I could have marked this up, but this is a library book. So, and now what I'm currently reading is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. I got about halfway last night. I decided to dedicate some more time. I'm actually buddy reading this with a friend. I need to check in with her to see where she is in the novel, but follows an unnamed narrator who has only ever known a life underground in this bunker. She's with about 40 other women and they are imprisoned in this bunker. And the narrator eventually is integral to these women escaping and then learning how to survive in this world that they, particularly the narrator, has no memory of and has no recollection of. And so I like how this book kind of picks up on the themes of memory and perception that I encountered in Restoration by Ave Barrera. So this is a very sequential novel to follow something like that. So it's interesting how I'm kind of exploring memory as a concept and as a method for moving a narrative along and exploring a character deeply. I really love that. I am finally getting to one of my most anticipated books of the year, and that is The Door by Magda Szabo. So I'm fully expecting a wonderful wild ride indicative of the typical Magda Szabo. I read Abigail last year and it was one of my favorites. The Door is very different. Abigail was a coming of age tale about a young woman understanding that the world is a deep, dark place that she needs to learn how to live in if she wants to survive. Whereas The Door almost feels like it's coming to this concept of survival from the other side of the spectrum. We follow two women, Magda, who is a successful writer, and she is learning how to exist in her culture as a published popular author. And she hires a housekeeper whose name is Emerence, and Emerence is very mysterious. You can tell that she has lived quite a life, but she's very tight lipped about it. So Magda becomes very fascinated, borderline obsessed with Emerence, and likewise Emerence towards Magda. And the two become very dependent upon one another, and crazy things ensue. Secrets are revealed. Survival is definitely a big thing that this novel is sort of focusing on. And I think once we learn, if we learn what Emerence's secret is, I'm sure we do, but I love Magda Szabo's writing because she really doesn't use extraordinarily flowery language, but the concepts that she explores are very interesting. In this book in particular, Magda Szabo really uses domesticity to highlight the human condition. And so in this book, it focuses on the home as this sphere of influence and the arena where these themes are playing out, both inside Magda's home and the fact that we never go inside Emerence's home. So there's this juxtaposition between in and out, high and low, and Emerence becomes the embodiment of many things, right? Of what it really means to be human, the monstrosity that comes with that, the beauty that comes with that, the care, the deception. A lot of things play out in the lives of Magda Szabo's characters, and I always love to see the journey that she brings them down. Next is Tangerine by Emanuela Anachum. This is about a young woman who has fled her home and upbringing in Morocco to London, has lived there for the majority of her life, but finally begins to feel the call to return home to Le Tangerin, which is her father's like bar restaurant. And it's a novel that explores migration, culture, identity, obviously within the realm of immigration and family, and how there are some ties that we can never sever, even if we want to. There is an element of grief here and the exploration of identity and family that really only grief can induce. And again, if you have followed my channel, you will know that that's a very personal topic to me. And then, of course, Flesh by David Saleh. I have really been wanting to read this. It follows Istvan, who is a Hungarian teenager. And as we follow him from teenage years into adulthood, we see him really struggle to make sense of the world he lives in now and the one that he grew out of. He doesn't know where he fits into this world. This is a very interesting story about the pressures of modernity as opposed to some of the tragedy that the past never feels concluded. And so when you're thrust into this never ending, constantly moving machine of modernity, it does interesting things to humans. So this book kind of plays out that tension set in the context of ever increasing globalization and a lot of the violence that has come with that. Very intrigued to read Flesh. If you've read it, let me know. What were your thoughts? And then I am reading two books with a book club. One of them is The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan. This is actually a reread for me. I read this when this first came out in 2022. I didn't love it. It was a middling read for me, and it's kind of on track to also be a middling read the second time around. I appreciate the author's inspiration for writing this book, and I think it brings up some very fair points and a desire to dive deeply into the insane amount of pressure that is put on a woman when she is pregnant and has given birth and now has a child, how little support there is for that new experience, that new life that you now have, that new identity, that new role. I like that she's questioning the roles that some women willingly step into and find themselves in and really are maybe not well suited for that role, or really don't have the desire to fill that role, but because society told them it was their role, they went in blindly. I'm really having a hard time connecting with the main character, and I can't tell if that's intentional to the way that Jessamine Chan intended us for her to be perceived. I really don't know. It's been good discussion so far with my online book club. And then the book that we are reading next to kind of explore some contrasting elements to The School for Good Mothers is Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I've really put off reading anything by Ishiguro. I don't know why, but I find Japanese literature and authors very intimidating. And so I think approaching this book in the context of a book club will be great because I can just kind of shoot those thoughts out and get a response or, other people's thoughts that can help me really categorize some of what I'm reading in my head. Hopefully that makes sense. And then last little chunk of book chat before I end this video is my next reads for the International Booker Prize list. I am buddy reading a few of these with my friend Shuba. I have tagged her in the description. She has an amazing YouTube channel. You should absolutely go follow her. She's a wonderful person. And if you like cozy, creative, bookish lifestyle stuff, she's for sure someone you want to be following. But we are reading a few books together. One of them is going to be On Earth as It Is Beneath. This is one that ended up on the short list. And then next, we will probably also read The Witch by Marie Ndiaye. This is translated from French and it's only 130 pages. So I like that there was two witchy stories on the Booker long list. This one also made the short list. This one did not make the short list, but I do want to read it. It's called Women Without Men by Sharnush Parsipur. It is translated from Persian by Faridun Farokh. This is a very culturally important book to the people of Iran, so I'm really interested in reading it for that aspect. This one did make the shortlist. It is called The Director by Daniel Kalman. This explores the ethics of creating art under a fascist regime, specifically under Hitler. So this takes place in the years of the Nazi rise to political power, and a director begins to question his complicitness in what is happening in his country to Jewish citizens, to other intellectuals, to anyone that was targeted by Hitler at the time. It doesn't seem like this is going to be as abstractly written as the other Booker books I have read so far. If you are reading the International Booker Prize list, I would love to know your thoughts. Do you agree with the short list? That is all for me today. I think I'm heading into this weekend with hope for rest. I really don't feel like I had a very I am going to sit and finish my cup of coffee and make a little bit more headway in I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. Tonight I am heading into the city to spend some time with a few friends. I've been really trying to get more face-to-face time with my friends as opposed to just sort of relying on texting or like Marco Polo or some of these other elements that I use during my week to keep in touch. We're going to a really popular restaurant that serves dumplings, and I cannot wait. I need dumplings on a soul level. I will leave you with some clips of our outing tonight. I wish you the best week ahead. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.